All right, let's dive in. Today, we're tackling a book that's, well, it's kind of a big deal. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Ah.
Stephen Covey, the author.
Oh yeah, over 40 million copies sold. It was huge when it came out like 30 years ago, and honestly,
Yeah.
still one of the most influential business books out there.
Crazy, right? Like, it clearly hit a nerve with people, but what exactly is it about this book that makes it so impactful? That's what we're going to try and figure out. We'll break down the 7 habits and, explore why they still resonate with so many people after all this time.
And we're going beyond the original text too. We're tapping into the 30th anniversary edition, which includes some insights from Sean Covey, Stephen's son, and a foreword by Jim Collins. Good to great.
Okay, so we've got a lot to unpack here. Let's get right to it. The 7 habits, they're not just like random tips, right? It's more of a whole approach to, I don't know, just being better at life.
Exactly. Covey calls it a principle-centered approach. Basically, it means aligning your actions with universal principles. Think integrity, honesty, fairness, building your life on something solid.
So it's not just about getting things done, but how you get them done and doing it in a way that's true to those principles.
You got it. It can be a game changer, especially if you feel stuck or overwhelmed. Instead of just reacting to everything, you become more proactive.
Which brings us to habit 1, be proactive. It's about taking charge instead of playing the victim.
Exactly. Recognizing you have a choice in how you respond to any situation.
There's this story in the book. This guy keeps complaining about his job, how much he hates his boss. And his friend's like, why not find a new job? And the guy says, I can't afford to leave. But his friend challenges him. So you're choosing to be miserable. Powerful, right? We often have more choices than we realize.
Totally. Being proactive is about taking responsibility for your own happiness, It's not just about taking action, it's about taking control.
Okay, so we're being proactive, but then how do we decide what actions to take? Habit 2, begin with the end in mind, right?
Yeah, this one's all about having a vision. What do you want your life to be about? What legacy do you want to leave behind?
Kind of like writing your own eulogy. I get it. It's about getting clear on your values so your actions actually have purpose.
Exactly. Living with intention, not just drifting along, reacting to whatever happens.
I've definitely had times where I felt like I was just going through the motions. It's exhausting.
It is. But when you have that clarity of purpose, it's energizing. Gives you a reason to get out of bed in the morning.
So we're proactive. We have our end goal in mind. How do we actually make it happen? Habit 3, put first things first.
Right on. This one's all about prioritizing. Covey talks about time management quadrants to help us figure out what's truly important versus what just feels urgent.
Oh, that's something I struggle with. Getting caught up in the everyday chaos, forgetting the stuff that really matters in the long run.
Happens to the best of us. Covey argues we should focus on the important but not urgent tasks, the stuff that helps us reach our long-term goals.
Can you give me an example of what that would look like?
Imagine a big project at work. It's important but not urgent right now. The deadline's weeks away. But if you keep putting it off, you'll end up stressed and overwhelmed when that deadline gets closer. Prioritize that important task early, work on it steadily, and avoid the last-minute panic.
So being proactive with our time instead of letting it control us.
Exactly. And you see how these first 3 habits connect. Being proactive gives you the power to choose. Beginning with the end in mind tells you what's important, and putting first things first makes sure you actually dedicate time to it.
It's like they build on each other. It's not just a random list, it's a way to live a better life.
Exactly. A framework for a more intentional, fulfilling life. And that's just the start. We still have 4 more habits to explore.
Okay, so we've covered the first 3 habits. Those were all about personal effectiveness, taking control, that sort of thing.
Right, and now we're moving into the realm of interdependence. It's how we interact with others, how we build strong relationships.
That's where it gets really interesting, right? I mean, personal growth is great and all, but we're not islands. So much depends on our relationships.
Absolutely. These next 3 habits, they give you a framework for creating win-win situations, communicating effectively, and collaborating so everyone benefits.
All right, I'm all ears. Let's start with habit 4, think win-win. Sounds simple enough, but I bet it's harder than it seems.
Yeah, it takes a mindset shift for sure. Moving away from that zero-sum game where for someone to win, someone else has to lose. Instead, you're looking for solutions that work for everyone.
So it's about finding common ground, collaborating. I see how that would be better in the long run, but what if the other person just isn't into win-win? What if they just want to get their way even at your expense?
That's a great question, and Covey actually addresses it. He says, yeah, you won't always find people who are open to win-win, but it should be your default, your starting point. Go into every interaction assuming there's a solution that benefits everyone, and you're more likely to find it.
So you're saying it's about setting the tone, but even if you try your best, what if a true win-win just isn't possible?
Well, even then, that win-win principle can guide you. It might mean walking away from a deal if it compromises your values, or maybe finding a compromise where both sides gain something. The point is, don't sacrifice your integrity or settle for something that leaves you feeling resentful.
That makes sense. Okay, on to habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Man, that feels so relevant these days when it seems like everyone's just waiting for their turn to talk.
It definitely takes effort, especially with how fast-paced everything is. It's about truly listening, not just waiting to respond.
So you're not just hearing the words, you're trying to understand the meaning behind them.
Right. Covey calls it empathic listening. Put yourself in their shoes, see the world from their perspective.
Oh man, I've totally been guilty of that, half listening while I'm already planning my response in my head. But when I think about conversations where I felt truly heard, understood, those were the ones that made a difference.
Exactly. Empathic listening builds connection, trust, stronger relationships, better conflict resolution, more productive collaboration.
Okay, so how do we actually do that, empathic listening? Any specific techniques?
Covey gives a few tips. One is simply focus on the other person, pay attention to their words, body language, tone of voice. Another is ask clarifying questions. Make sure you're getting their message accurately.
What about reflecting back what they've said?
Absolutely. Summarizing or paraphrasing what you heard, it shows you're really listening, and it gives them a chance to clarify if you missed something.
This is making me rethink how I approach conversations. They could be so much more meaningful if I focused on understanding first.
It's a total game changer, and it leads perfectly into habit 6, Synergize.
Synergize. I always think corporate jargon, brainstorming sessions.
It's more than that, though. Covey uses it to describe creative cooperation. When people with different perspectives come together, they can achieve something greater than any one of them could alone.
So the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Exactly. You value those differences, see them as strengths.
Can you give me an example, something a little less, corporate?
Sure, imagine a group of friends planning a trip. One's a meticulous planner, one's spontaneous, one's a total foodie. If they each try to force their vision, the trip's a disaster. But if they listen to each other, respect each other's strengths, and brainstorm, they can come up with a plan that incorporates all their interests.
I get it. It's not just about getting along. It's about using those differences to create something new and exciting.
Right. Harnessing that collective wisdom.
Okay, so we've got win-win thinking, empathic listening, and synergy. They're building on each other, making for more effective, fulfilling relationships.
You got it. It's a cycle. Win-win mindset makes you more likely to listen empathetically, which then makes synergy more likely.
Powerful stuff. But where does habit 7 fit in? Sharpen the saw. It seems different from the others.
Sharpen the saw is self-renewal. Taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It's what gives you the energy to practice all the other habits.
It's like you can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Exactly. If you're burnt out, exhausted, you're not going to be effective in any area of your life.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Prioritizing your own well-being so you can show up as your best self.
Right. Sharpen the saw is the foundation for all the other habits. Taking time to recharge, invest in your growth, cultivate that inner peace.
So how do we actually sharpen the saw? What are some concrete examples of things we can do to nourish ourselves in those 4 dimensions?
Now that's a great question, and one that we will explore in more depth in part 3 of our deep dive.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the 7 habits of highly effective people. We've been talking about, well, a lot.
We have. From personal effectiveness to those interdependence habits, and last time we left off with this idea of sharpen the saw.
Right, habit 7. It's all about self-renewal, but what does that actually look like?
It means recognizing you're not a machine. Got to recharge, replenish those resources.
Okay, I get that, but life gets busy. It's easy for self-care to fall by the wayside. How do we make sharpen the saw a habit, not just something we think about once in a while?
Covey breaks it down into 4 areas: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. Each one needs attention if we want to function at our best.
All right, let's break those down. Physically, what can we do to sharpen the saw?
The basics are key. Sleep, Good food, regular exercise, that's the foundation.
Sounds simple, but even that can be hard to keep up with sometimes.
It's about making those choices. Choosing sleep over scrolling late at night, picking a healthy meal over fast food, fitting in some exercise, even if it's just a walk at lunch.
Good points. What about sharpening the saw mentally?
Keep your mind engaged. Read, learn new things, have hobbies that challenge you intellectually.
I like that. So you're not just avoiding burnout. You're actively looking for ways to grow.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be complicated. Even listening to a podcast like this one can count.
Hey, you're speaking my language. Okay, we've covered physical and mental. What about emotional sharpening?
That's about nurturing your emotional well-being, building strong relationships, spending time with people you care about, doing things that bring you joy, help you relax.
So that's where those interpersonal habits come in. Trust and connection, those are crucial.
Absolutely. And don't forget self-compassion. It's okay to have bad days. The key is to acknowledge those emotions, process them in a healthy way, and not let them control you.
Good point. And finally, spiritual sharpening.
This is about connecting to something bigger than yourself. It could be religion, spirituality, nature, even a sense of purpose. Finding meaning in your life.
Something that's easy to overlook these days, I think.
But it's essential. It gives us direction, motivation, reminds us we're part of something bigger.
So Sharpen the Saw is really a holistic approach to self-care. You're taking care of all parts of yourself.
Exactly. And the best part is, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. Start small. Pick one thing in each area that resonates with you and make it a habit.
This has been a great deep dive into the 7 habits. No wonder this book is still so popular.
These principles, they're timeless, a guide for living a more meaningful, fulfilling life.
And hey, you don't have to wait to start applying these habits.
Yep.
Pick one that speaks to you, try it out this week. Small changes make a big difference over time.
Definitely. And if you want to dive deeper, grab a copy of the book. It's an investment you won't regret.
That's it for our deep dive this week. Keep learning, keep growing, and until next time, keep striving to be the best version of yourself.